Right, bore da. Good morning. My name is Anne Bynan. I chair the advisory panel of that wonderful institution, the Wales Governance Centre at Cardiff University, and I'll be chairing today this conversation on the future constitution of the UK post-Brexit. So first of all, the Right Honourable Carwyn Jones, the First Minister and the leader of Welsh Labour. Secondly, Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister. Thirdly, John Trickett, MP, Shadow Cabinet Officer, Minister, and John apologises he has to rush off for a very important House of Commons debate after he has contributed to this discussion this morning. And fourthly, Kezia Dugdale, MSP, leader of Scottish Labour. Quite an impressive array. So first of all, if I can ask Carwyn to make his opening comments, please.
Diolch, Anne. Some short comments to begin with, then we can get on to the questions. We know that Article 50 is going to be triggered today, and that raises a number of questions for us. First of all, from Wales's perspective, how will Wales's voice be heard in those negotiations? How will we ensure that any final deal is in the interest of the four nations of the UK? Secondly, of course, what does it mean for the internal workings of the UK? If the UK is to have an internal single market, there must be rules, and those rules must be policed in some way. Our view as a Welsh Government is that the rules should be agreed, not imposed, and secondly, that there should be an independent court that polices the rules of that internal single market. So important decisions there that will have to be looked at. And so this is not just a question of what will the UK look like in terms of its relationship with the EU after it leaves. It's a question of what will the UK look like in terms of its own internal mechanisms when the UK leaves. As a party, as a Labour Party, what we've been looking at is bringing together a process for developing our response across the whole of the UK, ensuring, of course, the voice of England is heard, that we understand how future devolution settlements might mesh with each other across the UK, and, of course, to emphasise that this is a partnership of four nations and strong regions within England working towards a common purpose. And today is part of the process of formulating a response on behalf of the Labour Party, which we've all been involved in order to secure a prosperous and secure and stable future for the UK.
Well, can I say, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here in Wales again, to be at Cardiff University, to be with Carwyn Jones and his colleagues here with you. I did used to be a university lecturer before I did other things, and I remember that universities stand for objectivity, impartiality, the pursuit of truth, the search for knowledge, and these were all the qualities we had to leave behind when we went into politics. I realise that today is actually a very difficult day. We have the declaration of Brexit through the letter to the European Union. We have a standoff between the Scottish Government and the UK Government over the future of Scotland and a potential referendum. We have the potential for direct rule now in Northern Ireland. And we have the different discontents of different regions about what is happening with Brexit and the effect of it on them. And Carwyn has put a very eloquent case for what Wales demands from a Brexit settlement. I've been thinking that the only things that have been moving forward this week in Britain are the clocks. I believe that Brexit will force us, perhaps for the first time, to face up to the vast structural inequalities in income, wealth and power between the regions and nations of the United Kingdom. I think if Brexit happens in the way that the government want it to happen, there will be a vast concentration of power in Whitehall at the expense of the nations and regions. And I'm very clear that we have got to start rethinking the British Constitution in a way that gives more power to the nations and regions of the United Kingdom. And that demands that we think imaginatively, not just about what powers come to the Welsh Assembly and to the Scottish Parliament, but also what happens within the regions of England. And I believe that while I did not choose Brexit and would prefer that we were staying in the European Union, and I think this is therefore a very sad day for Britain, I think we've got to now think imaginatively about how we can make sure that some of these long-term structural inequalities in the United Kingdom are dealt with. And that means that there has got to be a big discussion on a more federal, a more decentralised constitution for the country.
There's a question at the front here.
I don't really need
Well, Davin.
Gudora Jones, and since John has come onto the platform, I was going to claim that I'm the Methuselah of devolution in Wales, but John himself, of course, back in the early 70s. 49 years ago, just for 2 minutes, 49 years ago Monday, I was asked by Wilson and Callaghan to be the Research and Public Relations Officer for the Labour Party in Wales. My first job was to set up a working group to give the evidence to the Kilbrandon Crowther Commission and the elected council for Wales, and from which land, 30 years later, mind, 30 years later, there came the Welsh Assembly. And that would only have happened through a Labour government. Whatever people say about Labour, whatever people say about Blair and Gordon Brown and others, if it had not been the commitment to devolution in those years, we'd still be talking about it now. The problem we have, Labour must get its act together on devolution. Without the leadership of Labour, and I'm not Labour anymore, as you know, I'm a Liberal Democrat, but without the leadership of the Labour Party, it will never happen again. But the Labour Party needs to be strong because it is faced with English nationalism. That's what Mrs. May is.
And is there a question coming
And
into
the
this?
the question simply is, how are you going to approach to have that coherent party support, party plan, because I'm getting on in age, and I would really want to see a federal UK in my lifetime.
Right, so
and the question of size is easy.
Right.
That's one thing.
But let's answer the plan.
Just like
question.
America, with the United States, different states, the upper chamber, an elected second chamber of equal value between the various nations of Britain. It can be done.
Right. The plan, then. I'd like to take that, first of all. Gordon.
Well, I agree with your last point in particular. I see no long-term role for an unelected chamber in the form of the House of Lords, and I'm sorry, John, to put you out of a job, but I know you would support this. I think a Senate of the nations and regions is the only way forward for the House of Lords. Now, thank you for the work you did early on in the devolution struggle. When I started supporting devolution in Scotland, I was in a minority as well in the 1960s and 70s. And may I say, the one person I want to praise here who has done so much to push not only the case of Wales, but the case for a reform of the United Kingdom is your own Welsh First Minister, Carwyn Jones. I do want to pay tribute to what he has done, what he has proposed, and how he is actually now leading, I think, what is the proper discussion about Brexit. If Brexit is to happen, it cannot be the concentration of powers in Whitehall. Agriculture, fisheries, environment protection, state aids, regional policy, competition policy. Now, all these powers could lead to a far more centralised United Kingdom, but if they're used properly in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the regions, they could lead to a more decentralised United Kingdom. So Carwyn is, in my view, the linchpin in this process of trying to create a more decentralised United Kingdom out of what is something I did not want to happen, which is Brexit. So. Yes, I think we can move forward in the next few years, but as you rightly said, I think a lot depends on what happens now within England. There is a proposal for a council off the north in England that would bring together the northeast, the northwest, Yorkshire and Humberside. It's very much in line with what John Prescott has been proposing for many, many years. But if there was to be change in England, then I think it would then be possible to envisage a more decentralised and federal United Kingdom. And as Kezia said right at the beginning, this is not about the abstract building of constitutions for its own sake. This is about repairing social divisions within our country, allowing us to tackle long-standing inequalities, a recognition that what's best for London may not be best for the whole of the United Kingdom, and unless there are powers of initiative in different parts of the United Kingdom, then the inequalities within the United Kingdom grow. So this is about economic and social change and not just constitutional change.
Kezia?
Just briefly, I have a slightly different experience from yourself and indeed Gordon, because I was 15 years old when Labour took power in 1997. I was 16 during the first referendum that created the Scottish Parliament, and 18 when its doors opened. So my generation are the first generation to only know the Scottish Parliament as the centre of Scottish politics, and we accept it now as the new normal. 20 years on, we're in a new phase of reforming the United Kingdom that is forced upon us because of Brexit. But just as we grasped it in 1997, we must grasp it now and recognise that the answer to the challenges that we face is federalism, not, as Gordon says, for its own ends and constitutional sense, but because of the people that we seek to serve as the Labour Party, and indeed the people, the working interests of people, the length and breadth of this country.
To do, and that's what this debate and discussion is about.
Gordon.
I think it's important to recognise, and it's a great question, that we've been debating these issues, federalism, devolution, for more than a century. I remember looking at a Labour Party manifesto in Scotland in 1918, and the proposal was, they had three separate proposals different from the UK. One was land nationalisation, the second was what they called federal home rule, and the third was prohibition of alcohol. And of course, they achieved none of them in 100 years. And we copied it. That's right. But Gladstone couldn't solve this problem. Asquith couldn't solve this problem. Lloyd George couldn't solve this problem. When they were faced with the challenge of Ireland, nobody could find a way of resolving this question of how you balance the autonomy that people wanted with the cooperation that would mean the continuation of the United Kingdom. So I think, as John said, for the first time you've got the parties in Scotland, Wales and England talking together about how you could shape a more federal United Kingdom. You've got an agreed statement that has been issued, a statement, by the way, that wasn't changed even during the discussion we had in an hour, so people were agreed that we had to proceed. Scotland and Wales, I think, are pretty clear where they want to go. I think the issue is what will happen within England. I think this proposal we've just talked about, the Council for the North, is a way forward. Council for the Midlands, maybe Council for the South West, indirectly elected with the local councillors, MPs, as part of this council, with powers that could actually be some of the powers that are being taken back from Brussels on regional policy, on infrastructure investment, on transport. I think there is a way forward, and then you would see the United Kingdom looking more decentralised, more federal, but more capable of resolving this without the whole thing splitting apart. So I think there is progress, and I think the next stage is to work out where England will want to go in this issue. I think one way forward is actually to call a constitutional convention, to look at these issues as a United Kingdom as a whole, to bring people from all the different parts of the United Kingdom to do so. We did that in Scotland in 1989, and it did bring a consensus about the way forward for devolution. It is a possibility that we should consider for the whole of the United Kingdom.